Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Robert. Today, I want to talk to you about a very pivotal event, not only in U.S. history, but in the history of space exploration itself. The event I'm referring to is the Challenger disaster. This happened on January 28th, 1986. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, it was a space shuttle launch. And due to system failures, there was an explosion and the astronauts on board died. For those of you who are familiar with it, you may have come to look at this as a technical failure. And make no mistake, it was a technical failure, but it's also an excellent example of the dangers of groupthink. What is groupthink? Groupthink is a psychological phenomenon where when people come into a group, they start to all think the same and come to the same conclusions and make the same decisions instead of people having their own individual ideas and input. And as you can imagine, this can lead to some very questionable and dangerous decision making. So, what we want to do today with this presentation is look at the Challenger disaster through the lens of groupthink. And by doing this, we want to understand how the collective pressure, the poor management, and the defective equipment in this scenario all combine to lead up to one of the most devastating accidents or disasters in the history of space exploration. As a technician and a researcher in the oil and gas industry, I come into contact with unsafe and hazardous conditions every day on my job. And as a group, we together we researched this disaster and we came to find that there's lessons to be learned from this incident that we can all apply to our lives daily. What we have to understand is that knowledge is not always enough to prevent these mistakes and these disasters. It really takes a careful analysis of a situation and also excellent communication. But most importantly, it takes the willpower to stand up, go against the crowd, and disagree when you see something unsafe. So now let's examine what conditions and what behavior led to the Challenger disaster. We're going to start with the first point, which was failure to prioritize safety. So why did NASA fail to prioritize safety? Well, what you have to understand at this time period during the space race, there was a lot of pressure for the United States to stay on top. They were dominating. They were in the number one position, but other countries were catching up. And so the United States was under immense pressure to maintain that number one position and be the leader in space exploration. So, in the rush to do that and try to maintain that position, the officials at NASA disregarded a lot of early concerns about safety. Some of those concerns were brought up by engineers who had expressed their worries regarding a cold launch. But again, they had these worries, but the officials at NASA dismissed them. They were not important to them. So you have to understand that the very competitive nature of the space race often led to these hasty decisions being made, and safety was being sacrificed left and right in order to finish the mission quickly. So they were ignoring safety warnings, but along with that, they were also setting some impossible deadlines. You know, as I mentioned before, there was intense pressure placed on the crew, the engineers, everybody. And so they were being asked to meet an almost impossible deadline. And so this relentless pursuit of success led to all these fatal oversights in the process. You see, NASA's focus was on achieving this goal, right? And that overshadowed anything, right? That overshadowed even major safety concerns. And that's what contributed to this tragedy. According to the Columbia Journal of World Business, the organizational culture at NASA also contributed to sidelining these safety concerns. So that tells me they didn't have a strong safety culture there, because if they did, safety would have came first. But In this case, the mission, accomplishing the mission and trying to remain number one came first before the safety of the crew and everybody involved in this endeavor. And so, if we further analyze this, we see that the organizational dynamics there overshadowed all individual concerns about safety. And so that ties into groupthink because even though there were people raising concerns, eventually, because the officials who were the leaders of this group, this organization, thought one way, eventually everybody decided to go along with that decision, came to that same conclusion. And so, even though this was a major contributing factor to this tragic incident, um, the lack of precaution and poor engineering and also bad management played a part in this. And so, to tell you more about that, I'm going to pass it over to Elexia, and she will take you through the rest of the points and to the conclusion of our presentation.
The second factor of why the Challenger mission failed was because of poor engineering and management. Reality and desire became a blur to officials, which was detrimental as they ran faster than what their feet could carry them. They made mistakes and overlooked extremely important factors along the way. The engineers knew the risk, although they continued to do as they were told and sat back. So ultimately, both management and engineers had a part in the Challenger's demise. Van Hahn says that important data, tests, and results were ignored, which could have prevented the whole disaster. The organization's response to the technical issue was marked by the lack of communication, poor information management, and poor technical judgment and non-compliance with safety ensuring standards. Even though human decision making played a significant role in the tragedy, the defective equipment is what sealed the final decision. The O-rings that were put on the Challenger played a very significant role in this tragedy. The defective equipment caused the Challenger to ultimately explode and kill all 7 astronauts. Though the engineers expressed to national officials that the O-rings installed in the Challenger had experienced immense erosion due to them being recycled and overused, the claims were dismissed, unfortunately. Therefore, the morning of the takeoff, tragedy occurred. Because O-rings are made of synthetic rubber, they're supposed to stretch and bend in order to keep a seal. However, they're very temperature sensitive and they become brittle in cold weather. Unfortunately, frost developed on these O-rings the night before the Challenger was set to take off. Therefore, this prevented them from expanding correctly due to the brittleness. Through the O-ring breach after the takeoff, Diggins says that a jet of hot gas escaped and it punctured the main fuel tank, which ultimately led to the shuttle's inevitable explosion. These crucial elements that contributed to the Challenger's demise are all acknowledged and have not been ignored, and they go towards to ensure future shuttle missions to be handled correctly. Now, the Challenger disaster serves as a sobering reminder of the perils of groupthink, from failing to prioritize safety, poor management and engineering practices, and overlooking critical equipment defects. NASA's decisions were profoundly influenced by the desire to conform and to achieve unrealistic goals. Moving forward, it's essential to remember these lessons and prevent them to prevent future tragedies that could be related in any way with future shuttles and missions. So in that way, we can create an environment where safety and rational decision-making skills will prevail and will take priority. So additionally, the lessons that we learned from this disaster have informed improvements in safety protocols and organizational culture, ensuring that the future missions prioritize human lives and technical integrity. Thank you all for listening. I hope you learned the perils of groupthink and how we can better ourselves every day to prevent disasters like these.